A couple weeks ago, I made a video highlighting the things I would want most from a Guild Wars 3 MMORPG. From that, I got a few good responses on what all of you would like to see, including a few things I hadn't even thought about. Today I wanted to look at and respond to some of these, because I thought this was a very interesting discussion. I'm going to start this video off with a little bit of a disclaimer. I got a couple of comments saying, well, why don't you just keep playing Guild Wars 2 when Guild Wars 3 comes out? And that's not unfair, to be honest. It's very hard for me to think of something that I would want from a Guild Wars 3 MMO that isn't already in Guild Wars 2. But I'm not a game developer, so I can't think of everything, and I am entirely open to the idea that ArenaNet will think of something that blows me away. On the other hand, I am also open to the fact that Guild Wars 3 wouldn't be for me. Maybe I'll try it and the playstyle or something won't vibe with me, and that's perfectly okay. Guild Wars 1, despite for all intents and purposes being a dead game, still has a very passionate player base. Maybe Guild Wars 2 will be the same, and that's where you'll find me. I wanted to stay on this first comment and highlight it a little bit because it mentions something I didn't even think about, and that is PvP. I'm not a PvP player, I don't play Conquest, and I only play World vs. World when I need a gift of battle, but they are still both cornerstone game modes of Guild Wars 2, and leaving them out of my first video was a massive oversight. This comment says, we need more PvP content like Node Wars, Territory Wars, Siege Wars, and naval content for PvP/fishing. I think that could be pretty cool. It's no secret that PvP is incredibly neglected in Guild Wars 2 as it is, and a sequel could be the perfect place to breathe new life into the game mode. I do also think that they need to be very deliberate about what they do with PvP. If anyone remembers, back in 2015 they tried to do an esports league and that fizzled out very quickly, and I feel in a sense that PvP never truly recovered from that. I'm not saying they should try ESL again, I believe that ship has well and truly sailed, but I did briefly bring up in my video that PvP Stronghold was a system that was introduced with Heart of Thorns and almost immediately abandoned, and the last new PvP map was Jin's Dominion, released in 2018. The PvP scene is well overdue for some new life injected into it, and I'm glad this comment brought that up. Another thing this comment brought up was an open world with no loading screens, and I wanted to highlight it because it hadn't even crossed my mind. I think this is a great idea, especially as someone who is known in my raid group for getting stuck on loading screens due to my internet service. With the way the current map is set up in Guild Wars 2, spanning over entire continents separated by oceans and mountains, it's a little hard to imagine, but a fresh slate of a new MMO will obviously be downsized, so I think that is a great place to try it out. Another comment here reads, I want Skyscale baseline. I don't want to go back to walking everywhere. I thought that was interesting because I do agree a little bit with how well received and also how influential Guild Wars 2 mounts have been. It's very difficult to imagine a sequel game world without them. I'm not sure how I feel about it being baseline though. While the first Skyscale collection from Living World Season 4 is notoriously tedious, I do think they did a good job streamlining it for Soto. I think maybe having a small endgame achievement like that could be fun, but I can also see your idea working in the sense that the core experience of Guild Wars 2 was not designed with mounts in mind. If they designed Guild Wars 3 for mounts, a baseline mount wouldn't be a problem at all. I would prefer a baseline raptor or something similar personally, but I can see where you're coming from. I have two comments I want to talk about together now. The first says, I want pretty graphics and a PS5 version. I thought this one was an interesting point because I personally think that Guild Wars 2 still holds up pretty well due to it being highly stylized, but a new MMO in a maybe new engine welcomes a graphics overhaul, and I'm excited to see what that could mean. The second part of this for a PS5 version I also thought was interesting. ESO, Destiny 2, and BDO all have console clients, so the idea isn't completely out of the question. The only thing with this is that MMOs with console versions usually don't allow crossplay between console and PC players. This may not matter that much based on your friend group and how you prefer to play. We currently have no numbers for Guild Wars exactly how many players would prefer a console version as opposed to PC, so maybe a console version would be more populated than we think. I also want to briefly look at this comment which says Australian servers. That would be nice. Half of my raid group is composed of Australians and I'm always hearing about the ping. Apart from Australia and New Zealand, I also know that there are people all over the world who play Guild Wars 2, including South Asia, and maybe having a server that's at least on their side of the Pacific Ocean would be helpful. I also had this comment that goes over quite a bit, but what I really wanted to highlight was they expanded upon what I said about housing. That sounds really cool to me. They said, I not want housing, though I also want agriculture and husbandry, so we can grow cooking materials in our own fields and get eggs from chickens rather than RNG loot bags. I like this idea as opposed to just the home instance nodes that we have now. We do have the garden plots, but they're essentially identical to all of the other nodes. The idea of tending to and raising animals really appeals to me. This person is also the only one who brought up some story stuff that I would like to see. I hope Guild Wars 3 will be 100 years ahead of Guild Wars 2, and we'll see some races in Tyria evolve to more civilized status, and some of them join the alliance like Itzel and Tengu. Also, Quaggin drive crates from their lands and create an underwater kingdom, and they have a Quaggin king and queen. Can you imagine it? I'm also hoping that Guild Wars 3 is not a direct sequel and takes place a century or so in the future. I will attach the caveat to that I really hope Guild Wars 3 time skip will keep the genre in its realm of fantasy. I worry that a major time skip would bring Guild Wars into the realm of sci-fi, which I do love sci-fi, but that's not what I come to Guild Wars for. But maybe they'll change my mind. A Quaggin resurgence would also be interesting to see. Maybe they can get back on their feet now that the dragon's influence has left the oceans. It would be very interesting to see also if the Tengu do come out of isolation with time, and to expand upon that as well, how Kantha has developed now that they've come out of their own isolationist period. There are so many possibilities with this story. It's very exciting. I also wanted to bring up this comment because I've seen this sentiment floated around the community. I say they do Guild Wars 2 Remastered after seeing all the stuff people want and don't want. Guild Wars 2 and Unreal Engine 5, sell it to everyone for a one-time fee of 60 USD, keep all your progress, enjoy the new world, nobody quit the game, and more people will come. I wanted to bring it up because at the time I uploaded the original video, I did feel like this would personally be my ideal scenario, but as time goes on and I've had time to think about it, I've kind of changed on this a little bit. The reason I thought it would be my ideal scenario is because I still very much have a connection to Guild Wars 2. I still have a lot of goals I want to achieve in the game, and I'm not quite ready to move on. And while that is a valid stance to have, I don't know if that's necessarily a valid reason for me to say Guild Wars 3 shouldn't happen. As I mentioned at the beginning, Guild Wars 3 doesn't have to mean the death of Guild Wars 2. And as I think about it, I don't necessarily see Guild Wars 2.5 being realistic. Guild Wars 3 could appeal to more new players than Guild Wars 2.5, and would be a major opportunity to cut out the content bloat that Guild Wars 2 is often criticized for. Of course, Guild Wars 3 could also crash and burn, and everyone flocks back to Guild Wars 2, but we'll never know until it happens. I wanted to thank you all for your response to the first video. Like I said, I really enjoyed the discussion, and several people brought up new ideas and perspectives I hadn't even thought about. As fun as this discussion is, I do think it's worth remembering that this was thrown out in a shareholders meeting that was generously described by news outlets as hostile, and so who even knows if what they said was accurate? This is all just speculation. If you are on the fence about whether you should stick with Guild Wars 2 and all of this mess, I will say that Darren's just put out a video weighing the pros and cons, and I will link that in the description. Nevertheless, thank you for watching, and happy adventuring!